Welcome to West Film. We bring you the best movie recaps, reviews, ending explained videos, and hidden details from your favorite films. If you love great movies, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Now grab some popcorn, and let's jump into today's movie. One of the most significant aspects of Kickboxer's cultural impact was its role in popularizing kickboxing for Western audiences. While martial arts had already become familiar to many through decades of films and television shows, the movie introduced viewers to the brutal and effective fighting style, showcasing training camps, traditional rituals, and fast-paced combat techniques. Kickboxer sparked curiosity about the martial art among many audience members, and throughout the 1990s, kickboxing and martial arts schools experienced a surge of interest from people inspired by the film. Countless young viewers watched Jean-Claude Van Damme perform his famous kicks and training exercises and wanted to imitate what they saw on screen. This inspired a generation of martial arts enthusiasts to pursue combat training not as a sport, but as a means of personal improvement and self-discipline. The timing of the film's release played an important role in its historical significance. During the late 1980s, action cinema was dominated by muscular heroes who typically solved problems through overwhelming force. Stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone represented figures capable of defeating enemies through sheer physical power. Jean-Claude Van Damme's characters were somewhat different. While still physically impressive, they relied more on agility, technique, and discipline rather than brute strength alone. Kickboxer became one of the clearest examples of this alternative approach within the action genre. The movie also reinforced a narrative structure that would go on to become enormously influential within martial arts cinema. The story follows a familiar but effective formula. A hero suffers a devastating setback, trains under a wise mentor, develops new abilities, and ultimately confronts his enemy in a climactic battle. While this structure existed long before Kickboxer, the film executed it so effectively that it became a template for countless action movies, television episodes, and video games that followed. One of the most famous cultural contributions of Kickboxer is its dance sequence, featured during a celebration scene in which Jean-Claude Van Damme performs an energetic and unconventional dance. Originally just a light-hearted moment, audiences at the time found it entertaining and memorable. Decades later, the scene experienced an unexpected resurgence thanks to the internet as social media platforms and video sharing websites expanded. Van Damme's dance became one of the most widely shared moments from any 1980s action movie. Clips of the sequence circulated across the internet, introducing the film to entirely new generations of viewers who had never seen the complete movie. What began as a simple, light-hearted moment turned into a genuine cultural phenomenon, demonstrating how films can find new life in the digital age and remain relevant long after their original release. The film's villain, Tong Po, played by Michel Qissi, became a cultural icon representing the ultimate martial arts adversary. His intimidating demeanor and physical presence made him instantly memorable, and over time he became a reference point audiences would compare to some of the greatest villains in martial arts cinema history. Future films borrowed lessons from this portrayal of a silent, physically dominant antagonist, which became a recurring archetype throughout the 1990s and beyond. Video game developers also drew on similar villain designs, since creating a powerful final boss required generating that same sense of tension and anticipation. While not every creator directly credits Kickboxer as an influence, the film clearly popularized this particular type of antagonist within popular culture. The film's imagery of stretching, conditioning, kicking objects, and enduring painful exercises produced some of the most recognizable training montages in film history, reinforcing the idea that greatness comes through struggle. This message resonated strongly with audiences because it connected martial arts success to universal concepts like sacrifice and perseverance. The film also reflected broader cultural trends occurring during the late 20th century. During the 1980s, fitness culture was experiencing tremendous growth. Gyms were becoming increasingly popular, bodybuilding was gaining mainstream attention, and self-improvement was frequently celebrated in the media. Kickboxer perfectly embodied this spirit, using physical and personal transformation as inspiration for fitness and athleticism. The film's international setting also contributed to its significance. Though it presented a fictionalized version of its location, it exposed many Western audiences to foreign traditions and martial arts practices. While some aspects were simplified for entertainment purposes, the film offered a global perspective within action cinema at the time. In the years that followed, Kickboxer's influence could also be felt in combat sports entertainment, and many professional fighters have cited martial arts films as an inspiration for entering competition. The movie's portrayal of determination, resilience, and warrior spirit resonated with athletes as martial arts grew into a major international sport, and films like Kickboxer continue to serve as entry points for new fans discovering combat disciplines. Part of what makes Kickboxer so beloved as a martial arts classic is the fascinating story behind its creation. While audiences remember the film for its intense fights, memorable characters, and iconic training sequences, the production itself involved interesting challenges, creative decisions, unexpected obstacles, and remarkable effort from the cast and crew. Looking behind the camera reveals how a relatively modest action film managed to become one of the most enduring martial arts movies of its generation. The 1980s represented a period of tremendous growth for martial arts cinema in the United States. The unexpected success of Bloodsport drew audiences to stories centered on martial arts competition and personal redemption, and producers quickly recognized the opportunity to create another film that could capitalize on Jean-Claude Van Damme's growing popularity. Kickboxer was developed with the intention of showcasing Van Damme's athletic range, and rather than focusing on a multi-fighter tournament, the filmmakers built a more personal revenge story that gave the movie additional emotional stakes alongside the physical action. The creative team wanted the protagonist to be motivated by protecting and avenging a loved one rather than simply winning a championship. The film benefited from having a director experienced in action filmmaking, someone whose background in cinematography helped blend dramatic storytelling with impressive fight choreography to establish a distinct visual and narrative style closely associated with the movie. One of the most significant production decisions involved choosing the setting. The story takes place in a country closely associated with kickboxing, and by filming in that environment, the filmmakers created a sense of authenticity and exotic adventure that set Kickboxer apart from other action films of the time. Numerous practical and logistical challenges arose from shooting abroad to adapting to local conditions. Transportation, weather, and language barriers all required considerable flexibility from the production. Still, filming on location added significant value to the final product. The streets, villages, temples, and landscapes captured on film contributed greatly to the atmosphere and storytelling, giving the movie a sense of realism that a studio's set could never replicate. The production's use of real environments helped immerse audiences in the world of the story, lending the film both a distinctive visual identity and a strong sense of realism. Jean-Claude Van Damme's commitment to the project was evident from the moment filming began. He established himself as one of the most physically gifted performers in action cinema during Kickboxer, bringing both athletic skill and emotional depth to his character's journey of frustration, determination, and personal growth. His work on the film's physical sequence, kicks, stretches, and training routine was especially impressive. and many of the exercises featured in the movie were inspired by genuine martial arts conditioning methods. Van Damme's extraordinary flexibility became one of the film's major attractions, and the production frequently used training montages to communicate his character's physical and spiritual development. The filmmakers understood that audiences needed to see this transformation clearly before the final confrontation, as is typical in action films of this kind. Dennis Alexio also played a vital role in the production. His calm, believable performance helped create a convincing mentor-student relationship with Van Damme's character. Off-camera, his experience with martial arts cinema helped bring added credibility to many aspects of the training sequences. The friendship between actors Michel Qissi and Jean-Claude Van Damme, dating back to their time in Belgium, also proved important, since martial arts choreography often carries a real risk of injury when performers aren't working together as trusted collaborators rather than mere technicians executing moves. Qissi's contribution to the climactic battle was significant, and extensive preparation went into the fight choreography. Designing martial arts action for film requires balancing realism with entertainment. If the choreography is too controlled, audiences become bored. If it's too chaotic, viewers struggle to follow the movement. The production team spent considerable time designing sequences that felt believable while still delivering the desired visual impact. Rather than relying on trick photography, the martial artists performed genuinely complex combinations of punches and kicks, and the filmmakers used camera angles and editing to maximize the visual impact of these exchanges, especially during the final battle, one of the most celebrated confrontations in Van Damme's filmography. Another fascinating piece of production history involves the famous dance sequence featuring Van Damme, which remains one of the most recognizable moments in the movie. At the time of filming, it was intended as a light, relaxing scene meant to show the character enjoying himself before the story turned more serious. It would go on to become a genuine cultural phenomenon. On the surface, Kickboxer follows a classic story structure, but the film was carefully designed to resonate with audiences by combining themes of determination and redemption. The movie follows a well-established storytelling formula. A hero experiences a devastating setback, embarks on a transformative journey, develops new abilities, and ultimately confronts the source of his suffering. This memorable formula helps explain why the film has remained so engaging. The story introduces the brothers Eric and Kurt Sloan, with Eric presented as one of the most successful kickboxers in the world, a champion who has dominated competition in the United States, while Kurt serves primarily as his brother's supporter and companion rather than a champion in his own right. This opening sequence serves several important narrative functions. First, it establishes the strong bond between the brothers so audiences quickly understand that they care deeply for one another and share a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. It also introduces Tong Po, a formidable figure whose confidence borders on arrogance, as he claims superiority over the best fighters in the world. When Eric decides to travel abroad to challenge this champion, the decision immediately raises concern among local observers, who warn that Tong Po is no ordinary opponent. The stories about his brutality and fighting ability create a strong sense of dread for the audience. This build-up functions as an approaching storm. The film carefully builds anticipation around the eventual fight, and by the time it finally happens, the audience is fully invested in the outcome. The confrontation between Eric and Tong Po serves as a pivotal turning point in the story. Rather than delivering a competitive contest between two fighters, the film shows a systematic, overwhelming display of destruction. Tong Po's precision and cruelty shock both the characters and the audience. In that moment, he is transformed in the audience's eyes from a formidable opponent into a true villain. Viewers no longer see him as simply a tough competitor but as a cruel and dangerous individual who enjoys causing suffering. Eric's resulting paralysis becomes the emotional foundation of the narrative, and everything that follows stems directly from this injury. Structurally, this moment serves as the catalyst that pushes the protagonist, Kurt, toward transformation. The next portion of the film focuses on Kurt's initial attempts to seek revenge, and the narrative quickly demonstrates that determination without proper preparation is insufficient. This realization leads to one of the film's most important developments: Kurt's introduction to Xianqiao as a mentor figure who represents deeper knowledge, discipline, and spiritual growth. This marks a pivotal shift, moving the film from a straightforward revenge story into a story about training and developing the skills necessary to meet the challenge on a deeper level. It also illustrates Kurt's emotional evolution. While he is initially motivated primarily by anger, as his training progresses he learns patience and self-control, showing the audience that mental preparation is just as important as physical training. The training montages themselves become some of the film's most effective storytelling techniques, building Kurt's confidence and giving the audience a clear sense of his progress, keeping them invested as he overcomes each challenge and moves a step closer to the inevitable confrontation. At the midpoint of the story, Kurt begins to demonstrate genuine growth. He no longer fights with the same inexperience he showed at the start, and this shift builds suspense, showing the audience his growing potential while Tongpo remains a looming obstacle. As the narrative approaches its final act, the tension builds significantly. Kurt's preparation is finally complete, and the story turns to the climactic confrontation between him and Tongpo. This final battle functions as the culmination of everything the film has built toward. Every lesson learned, every sacrifice made, everything Kurt has fought for comes down to this moment. The battle is not merely a physical contest but a symbolic struggle between discipline and brutality, perseverance and intimidation. One reason the climax remains so effective is that Kurt's victory doesn't feel easy or guaranteed. Rather, it feels earned and inevitable, and the audience understands the sacrifices that made it possible. Eric's suffering, Kurt's training, and his perseverance throughout the story. Beyond its explosive fight scenes, intense training montages, and memorable martial arts action, Kickboxer contains a variety of themes and symbolic elements that give the story more depth than a simple revenge narrative. Beneath the punches, kicks, and dramatic confrontations lies a story about perseverance, personal transformation, discipline, justice, family loyalty, and the struggle between physical strength and inner strength. These themes help explain why the film continues to resonate with audiences. Perhaps the most important theme in Kickboxer is personal transformation. At the beginning of the film, Kurt is a capable martial artist but lacks the confidence, discipline, and emotional maturity necessary to become a champion in his own right. He lives in the shadow of his brother, who has already achieved fame and success in the world of kickboxing. Kurt is loyal and supportive, and Eric's injury becomes the catalyst for his transformation, forcing him to confront his own limitations. Throughout the film, audiences witness not only his physical development but also his emotional growth. By the end of the story, he has become a stronger, wiser, and more disciplined individual. The training sequences symbolize this transformation in a powerful way. Every painful exercise, every difficult lesson, and every obstacle Kurt overcomes represents a stage in his personal evolution. The audience isn't simply watching a fighter become stronger, they're watching a man rebuild himself after experiencing tragedy. Another major theme explored in the film is discipline versus raw power. Tongpo represents physical dominance. He is incredibly strong, skilled, and intimidating, but he relies on brutality and uses overwhelming force to defeat his opponents. Xianqiao, Kurt's mentor, represents the opposite philosophy: self-control, balance, and mental discipline. He teaches Kurt that true mastery of martial arts requires more than just physical ability. A fighter must also develop emotional control and inner strength. This contrast forms the central ideological conflict of the film. The final battle isn't simply a fight between two men, it's a confrontation between two opposing philosophies, and its outcome suggests that discipline and determination can overcome even the most intimidating obstacles. Ultimately, the film argues that true power comes from mastering oneself rather than dominating others. Family loyalty serves as another important theme running throughout the story, providing much of its emotional foundation. Unlike many action heroes motivated by personal ambition, Kurt's primary goal is helping his brother and restoring justice after Eric's suffering. This motivation makes him a deeply sympathetic protagonist. His actions are driven by love and responsibility rather than selfish desire, and audiences connect with his determination because of his genuine concern for his brother. The film also explores the vulnerability of even the strongest individuals. At the beginning of the story, Eric is an invincible champion, admired by many and feared by his opponents, yet in a single fight, everything changes. His downfall shows that physical strength alone cannot protect people from tragedy. This connects closely to the film's central theme of perseverance. Kurt's training methods and the emotional burden of Eric's condition would be enough to break many people, yet Kurt continues moving forward despite seemingly impossible circumstances, facing obstacles both in the ring and in life more broadly. The difficult training montages serve as a visual representation of perseverance. Here Kurt struggles and fails before eventually succeeding, reminding audiences that real improvement rarely happens instantly and instead requires effort, patience, and resilience. Justice and revenge form another important thematic layer. Kurt's initial motivation is simple revenge, but as the story progresses, his motivation evolves through personal growth into something closer to justice rather than pure vengeance. This shift is significant because it isn't just about restoring balance or correcting a wrong, it's about proving that cruelty and intimidation don't ultimately win. By the film's end, revenge alone is revealed as insufficient. The story instead emphasizes the importance of controlling one's emotions rather than being consumed by them. The film's setting also carries symbolic importance. The unfamiliar, foreign location represents a place of transformation and self-discovery for Kurt, and by the end of his journey, he has undergone a profound personal transformation there. Like many classic stories, the film uses travel to an unfamiliar setting as a metaphor for inner change. Kickboxer's setting becomes a symbolic testing ground where Kurt confronts his weaknesses and ultimately discovers his true potential. Xian Chow himself embodies several symbolic roles. On one level, he's simply a martial arts instructor. On another, he functions as a spiritual guide, helping Kurt understand that true mastery goes beyond fighting technique and requires developing wisdom and emotional balance. Mentor figures like Xian Shao often symbolize the accumulated knowledge that comes through experience, representing the wisdom that younger individuals must seek out in order to reach their full potential. One of the reasons Kickboxer remains so memorable after all these years is its distinctive visual style. While many action films of the late 1980s relied heavily on explosions, gunfire, and urban environments, Kickboxer created a unique identity through its use of real-world locations, atmospheric lighting, dynamic camera work, and carefully choreographed martial arts action. The film may not have had the budget of a major Hollywood production, but its visual presentation played a major role in transforming what was, on paper, a fairly simple revenge story into an immersive cinematic experience. The filmmakers understood that the setting itself was one of the story's greatest strengths, and the production's use of real, local environments helped create a world that felt authentic to international audiences. For many Western viewers in 1989, the environment shown in the film felt exotic and unfamiliar. The streets, villages, markets, and rural landscapes provided a visual backdrop that immediately distinguished the movie from many of its competitors. The cinematography made effective use of these locations, and establishing shots featuring local architecture, busy streets, and natural landscapes helped immerse audiences in a world that felt genuinely different from their own, reinforcing the sense of a challenge Kurt would have to overcome in order to grow. Cinematographer David Worth brought considerable experience to the project, and his work focused on maximizing visual impact despite the film's budget limitations. Rather than relying on expensive visual effects, the production leaned on practical filmmaking technique with a careful framing, effective lighting, and strong location photography became essential tools for creating a cinematic look. One notable aspect of the film's visual style is its use of natural environments, taking advantage of real-world locations rather than elaborate studio sets. This decision contributed significantly to the movie's authenticity, avoiding the artificial feel of manufactured streets and crowds and lending the story a strong sense of realism. The contrast between different settings also plays an important narrative role. Early scenes involving Eric present a relatively modern, professional world reflecting his status as a champion, while as the story progresses, the settings shift toward environments that feel less comfortable and more focused on personal growth. Mirroring Kurt's journey away from his old life, lighting serves as another important component of the film's visual identity. Throughout the movie, the filmmakers frequently used natural, sunlit environments to capture the warmth of the tropical setting, filling scenes with bright, golden, vibrant tones that create a sense of visual warmth. At the same time, many of the more dramatic moments use heavier shadow and contrast. This kind of lighting emphasizes muscle definition, facial expressions, and physical movement, and its purpose isn't simply to illuminate the action but to make each strike feel impactful and dramatic. Shadows also help heighten the physical presence of the fighters. The film's color palette deserves particular attention as well. Earthy tones dominate much of the visual presentation, with browns, greens, yellows, and oranges appearing throughout the movie. These colors contribute to the sense of realism while also reflecting the natural environment surrounding the characters. Tong Po's visual design, meanwhile, is deliberately imposing and forbidding, frequently making him stand out sharply against his surroundings. The filmmakers understood that a memorable villain needs a strong visual identity even before he speaks or fights, and Tong Po's appearance communicates danger and intimidation on its own. Camera placement is also worth noting, since Kickboxer demonstrates considerable skill in shooting martial arts action. Fight scenes in this genre pose a real challenge, because audiences need to be able to clearly follow the action. If the camera moves too quickly or cuts too frequently, viewers lose their sense of orientation. The filmmakers generally avoid these problems by allowing many of the techniques and combinations to remain visible within the frame during fights. The camera frequently uses medium and wide shots that show the performers' full bodies, letting audiences appreciate the athleticism involved in Van Damme's kicks, flexibility, and movement, and allowing them to clearly observe the complete action. The film frequently uses low-angle shots to emphasize the power and presence of its characters. Tong Po, in particular, benefits from this technique here by positioning the camera below him. The filmmakers make him appear more dominant and threatening, a strategic choice that also emphasizes Kurt's vulnerability during the earlier stages of the story. As his training progresses and his confidence grows, the cinematography gradually presents him in a stronger, more assertive manner, subtly communicating his development without requiring dialogue. The training montage is one of the most visually iconic sections of the film. The filmmakers use a variety of camera techniques to maintain energy and momentum throughout these sequences. Quick cuts, tracking shots, close-ups, and wide-angle compositions are combined to create a sense of progression and intensity. Close-ups on physical effort, strained muscles, and pained facial expressions communicate the difficulty of training, allowing audiences to feel the effort involved in Kurt's transformation. Slow motion is occasionally used to emphasize dramatic moments rather than overusing the technique. The filmmakers reserve it for significant moments, heightening the impact of important kicks and strikes. The climactic fight between Kurt and Tong Po represents the culmination of the film's overall visual strategy. Every aspect of the cinematography is designed to maximize excitement, with camera angles emphasizing the fighter's physical abilities while maintaining a careful balance between speed and clarity for the audience. While Kickboxer is primarily remembered for its martial arts action, training montages, and unforgettable fight sequences, one of the film's most underrated strengths is its use of music and sound. The soundtrack and sound design play a crucial role in shaping the audience's emotional experience of the movie, from the energetic training sequences to the tense confrontations and dramatic climactic battle, helping transform it into a memorable cinematic experience. The late 1980s represented a fascinating period for action movie music. Many films of the era blended traditional orchestral scoring with electronic synthesizers, contemporary arrangements, and popular music influences. Kickboxer reflects this trend while also developing a musical identity that complements its martial arts themes and exotic setting. The film's score was composed by Paul Herzog, whose earlier work on Bloodsport made him a logical choice for Kickboxer. The filmmakers needed a composer capable of generating excitement and emotional investment, meeting the momentum requirements of martial arts cinema, and creating music that could support physical action while also conveying motivational and dramatic energy. The music reflects the emotional state of the protagonist as he grows more determined during moments of growth. It becomes progressively more powerful and inspirational, helping audiences connect more deeply with his transformation from a grieving brother into a disciplined warrior. This musical support proves especially significant during the training sequences, which offer some of the best examples of scoring supporting storytelling. Training montages in sports and martial arts cinema often depend heavily on their accompanying music, and in Kickboxer the score creates a real sense of progress and momentum, keeping the audience engaged as Kurt tackles increasingly difficult exercises. The music reinforces his growing strength and capability, using driving rhythmic patterns and uplifting musical themes to create an atmosphere of determination and perseverance, demonstrating how music can communicate development without relying on dialogue. The combination of visuals and music creates an experience far more powerful than either element could achieve independently. The film's action sequences also benefit significantly from careful musical composition. During fights, the score frequently intensifies to match the action, supporting the choreography without distracting from it. An important balance, since martial arts audiences need to hear the impact and physical effort involved in combat. During major confrontations, faster rhythms and more aggressive musical themes create anticipation and excitement, signaling to the audience that something important is unfolding. Even individual decisive blows are underscored by careful sound design. Tong Po's presence is also reinforced through the audio design. Since the character speaks relatively little, the combination of music and sound effects helps establish his intimidating reputation. Dark, ominous musical cues reinforce his role as the film's primary threat, with the soundtrack presenting him almost as a force of nature. The music surrounding him rarely suggests vulnerability, instead creating an atmosphere of danger and inevitability that contributes to the audience's perception of him as an almost unstoppable opponent. One particularly interesting aspect of the film's audio design is its incorporation of regional musical influences reflecting the story's setting. While the soundtrack remains largely accessible to international audiences, Certain musical textures and elements help establish a sense of place. These influences are used carefully rather than overwhelmingly. The goal wasn't to create a documentary-like representation of the setting, but to remain connected to the environment while still functioning as an effective action movie score. The famous dance sequence involving Van Damme also represents a notable use of music. At the time of its release, it provided comic relief, showing a lighter side of the protagonist, and the upbeat music created a sharp contrast with the film's more serious and violent moments. As discussed earlier, this scene became one of the most widely shared clips from the movie, and much of its enduring popularity stems from the combination of energetic dancing and memorable music, demonstrating how a small musical moment can leave a lasting impression on audiences. Sound effects were also crucial to the film, since martial arts cinema depends heavily on convincing audio to make the action feel real and keep audiences engaged. Every kick, block, and impact needed to feel powerful, and the sound design team carefully crafted effects to maximize the perceived force of each technique. Many strikes are accompanied by exaggerated impact sounds for dramatic effect. While these sounds aren't entirely realistic, audiences generally expect and accept this heightened style in martial arts films, since it makes each hit feel more impactful. The training sequences also make excellent use of sound effects of the crack of bamboo, the impact of kicks against training objects, and the sounds of physical exertion and environmental noise all contribute to the sense that Kurt's preparation is genuine and demanding, reinforcing the physical challenges he faces. Ambient sound plays an important role in establishing atmosphere as well. The streets, villages, and natural environments of the filming locations feel alive thanks to background conversations, animal sounds, traffic, and other environmental noise, all of which help create a believable world around the characters. When Kickboxer was released in 1989, it entered a highly competitive action movie landscape. The late 1980s represented one of the most successful periods for action cinema, with audiences regularly flocking to see stories featuring larger-than-life heroes, spectacular fights, and dramatic battles between good and evil. While Kickboxer was not considered a major blockbuster on the level of the biggest studio productions of its era, it quickly found an enthusiastic audience. Critical reception was something of a mixed bag, marked by a combination of skepticism and admiration, along with growing recognition within the action movie community over time. At the time of its release, professional critics were divided on how to evaluate martial arts films. Many reviewers judged the movie against standards typical of dramatic cinema, focusing heavily on dialogue, narrative complexity, and acting performances. Because Kickboxer prioritized physical action, training sequences, and combat choreography, some critics dismissed it as a straightforward genre film lacking significant cinematic ambition. Other reviewers were more willing to judge the movie on its entertainment value, while still criticizing aspects of the screenplay. Some felt the story followed too familiar a formula, offering audiences little in the way of narrative surprise before the final confrontation. To these critics, the plot itself was less important than the action, and many reviewers actually considered the story's simplicity to be one of the film's strengths rather than a weakness. The story was easy to follow, emotionally engaging, and focused on themes that resonated with audiences. Jean-Claude Van Damme's performance generated particularly mixed reactions. Critics praised his athletic abilities and notable screen presence while expressing reservations about his acting range. During the late 1980s, Van Damme was still establishing himself as a leading action star, and many reviewers viewed him primarily as a martial artist rather than a traditional actor. Audiences, however, responded differently. Fans appreciated his sincerity, charisma, and commitment to physically demanding performances, and this became one of the film's greatest strengths as an action vehicle. The fight choreography received considerably more universal praise. Even critics who weren't enthusiastic about the screenplay frequently commended the quality of the combat sequences, describing the film's action as energetic, visually dynamic, and emotionally engaging. Unlike many martial arts films that focus solely on technical skill, Kickboxer connected its fights directly to the story's emotional stakes. The climactic battle between Kurt and Tong Po received particular attention, with audiences appreciating how the confrontation felt earned. The final fight represented the culmination of Kurt's entire journey, and this combination of physical action and narrative payoff helped set the film apart from many comparable productions. Michel Qissi's portrayal of Tong Po also became one of the most praised elements of the movie. Critics and audiences alike recognized the effectiveness of his intimidating performance, which relied on relatively little dialogue yet still conveyed genuine physical menace and a brutal fighting style that left a strong impression. Over time, Tong Po became one of the most recognizable antagonists in martial arts cinema, and his popularity contributed significantly to the film's lasting reputation, helping distinguish Kickboxer from other action movies released during the same period. Commercially, the film was successful within the martial arts genre. While it didn't achieve the financial scale of major Hollywood blockbusters, it generated strong interest among action fans and proved that Van Damme's success following Bloodsport was not a temporary phenomenon. Perhaps even more important than its theatrical performance was the film's success in the home video market during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Video rental stores played a major role in determining a film's long-term popularity, and Kickboxer became a frequent rental choice for action fans and martial arts enthusiasts. Many viewers discovered the film through repeated VHS rentals or by watching it with friends and family, and this repeated viewing over time contributed significantly to the growth of the film's cult following, keeping it visible long after its original theatrical run. As Van Damme's career expanded throughout the 1990s with films like Universal Soldier and other action titles, many fans revisited his earlier work, and Kickboxer was frequently cited as one of the defining films of his career, an early example that helped shape his broader filmography. Different audiences discovered the movie at different points in time. During its original release, some viewed it as a fairly standard piece of 1980s action cinema, while others genuinely admired its straightforward storytelling and practical fight choreography. The rise of internet culture then created a notable shift in public perception, as certain scenes, particularly Van Damme's famous dance sequence here, became widely shared online. What had originally been a relatively small moment in the film became a viral sensation, drawing renewed attention and introducing Kickboxer to audiences who had never encountered it before. As online discussions about action cinema expanded, the film's cult status grew further, and it became one of the most frequently cited examples in conversations about martial arts films. Kickboxer was praised for its sincerity, memorable villain, effective training sequences, and iconic final battle. The film did not receive major awards from prominent organizations, which was fairly common for martial arts and action movies of the era, since these films were often overlooked by prestigious award bodies despite their popularity with audiences. Nevertheless, Kickboxer proved to have far more enduring value than many awards-focused productions of the time. In terms of controversy, the film has faced occasional criticism regarding its portrayal of certain cultural elements, as some observers have argued that aspects of the setting reflect simplified or inaccurate interpretations designed primarily for entertainment purposes, and this remains part of broader conversations about representation in international action cinema. Few martial arts films from the 1980s have maintained the level of recognition and admiration that Kickboxer continues to enjoy. While many action movies achieved temporary success before fading into obscurity, Kickboxer managed to establish a lasting legacy that continues to influence filmmakers today. The original film's impact can be seen in the franchise it spawned, the sequels it generated, and its lasting cultural presence within the world of action cinema. One of the most immediate effects of Kickboxer was its contribution to establishing Jean-Claude Van Damme as one of the defining action stars of the late 20th century. It introduced him to international audiences and confirmed that his appeal was not based on a single successful film. The movie demonstrated that he possessed the charisma and screen presence necessary to carry major action productions. Following the success of Kickboxer, Van Damme's career expanded rapidly through the early to mid-1990s, and he became one of the most recognizable faces in action cinema, appearing in films like Double Impact, Universal Soldier, Hard Target, and Sudden Death, all of which helped solidify his status as a global action icon. Many fans and critics view Kickboxer as one of the key foundations that success was built upon. The film played an important role in defining the Van Damme formula, combining personal trauma, intense training sequences, and situational storytelling elements that would recur throughout his later career. Beyond Van Damme's individual career, the movie also influenced the broader martial arts genre. Throughout the 1990s, countless films adopted variations of the story structure popularized by Kickboxer, or a formula centered on a protagonist who experiences a devastating setback, trains under a mentor to develop physical and mental strength, and ultimately overcomes a seemingly unbeatable enemy. While this narrative framework existed before Kickboxer, the film presented it in a compelling and accessible way that inspired subsequent productions. Filmmakers recognized how strongly audiences connected with stories of growth and perseverance, and as a result, similar themes became increasingly common across martial arts cinema. The training montage itself became one of the film's most influential contributions. While training sequences existed in earlier films, Kickboxer elevated them into a central storytelling device, demonstrating how physical preparation could remain engaging when tied closely to character development. This shift in strategy meant that training was no longer just a way to explain a character's growing skill. It became an opportunity to explore determination, discipline, sacrifice, and transformation. The influence of Kickboxer's training sequences can still be seen in modern sports dramas, combat films, and action movies today. Tong Po's character also set a standard for villains in subsequent martial arts films. Rather than relying on extensive dialogue, elaborate scheming, or exaggerated personality traits, Tong Po demonstrated that a villain could feel deeply memorable primarily through physical presence, quiet confidence, and brutal essence, yet terrifying without requiring extensive explanation or backstory. In the years that followed, numerous action films and video games introduced antagonists with similar characteristics: massive, intimidating fighters serving as seemingly unstoppable final bosses, reflecting Tong Po's lasting influence on combat-oriented storytelling. The film's impact also extended beyond cinema into the world of martial arts and combat sports themselves. Many practitioners cite Kickboxer as a source of inspiration. Young viewers who watched Kurt's journey often became interested in pursuing martial arts training themselves, with some eventually joining kickboxing or karate programs after being inspired by the film. This influence was particularly significant because Kickboxer introduced many Western audiences to a fictionalized version of Muay Thai and its culture, sparking widespread curiosity about the sport. In the years following the film's release, interest in these disciplines continued to grow internationally, and the expansion of martial arts and combat sports throughout the 1990s and 2000s further reinforced the film's ongoing relevance, as fans became increasingly interested in striking disciplines and frequently cited Kickboxer as one of the most memorable examples that sparked their interest. Another important aspect of the film's legacy is the franchise it spawned. The story expanded into multiple sequels over the following years, And while Jean-Claude Van Damme did not remain the central figure throughout the entire series, the franchise continued exploring themes of martial arts competition, personal growth, and revenge. The existence of numerous sequels demonstrates the strength of the original concept and the audience's continued interest in the world established by the first film, allowing the franchise to keep evolving long after its initial release. The property's enduring popularity also proved valuable for a modern reboot decades later, which introduced the story to a new generation of viewers while still appealing to longtime fans, a decision that highlighted the lasting popularity of the original movie and its continued relevance within action cinema. Internet culture added another chapter to the film's legacy. As discussed, the famous dance sequence became one of the most widely shared moments from any 1980s action film through video sharing platforms, social media, and online communities, reaching millions of viewers who may never have watched the complete movie. This viral popularity helped transform Kickboxer from something of a niche cult favorite into a recognized cultural reference point, demonstrating how older films can find new audiences through digital platforms and remain part of public conversation decades after their original release. Eric's character arc, though it receives less screen time, carries tremendous emotional significance. At the beginning of the film, Eric is a confident, successful reigning champion, admired by fans and respected by competitors, with his accomplishments having shaped much of his identity. His confrontation with Tong Po forces him to face vulnerability for the first time, and the paralysis he suffers changes the trajectory of his future dramatically. Even as he remains largely in the background for much of the story's remainder, audiences can still sense his ongoing struggle, even though it plays out mostly off-screen, and his character continues to serve as an important source of motivation for Kurt, reinforcing the film's themes of family loyalty and resilience. Rather than disappearing from the narrative after his injury, Eric continues to influence Kurt's decisions and growth throughout the story. Perhaps the most interesting supporting character is Xian Chao, the mentor figure who guides Kurt's transformation. Xian Chao fulfills the traditional mentor role found in many martial arts stories, but with meaningful nuance. When audiences first meet him, he seems somewhat unconventional and mysterious, and the depth of his knowledge isn't immediately revealed. His assumptions and approach to teaching reflect a deeper understanding of strength and combat, and his primary motivation is helping Kurt discover his full potential, recognizing that Kurt's greatest obstacles are psychological and emotional rather than purely physical. As a result, much of his teaching focuses on discipline, patience, and self-control. Unlike Kurt, Xian Chao doesn't undergo a dramatic transformation of his own. Instead, he functions as a stabilizing force within the story, symbolizing accumulated experience and wisdom, and fulfilling this role effectively throughout. He represents the idea that younger individuals must be guided before they can achieve true maturity, and his presence shapes nearly every aspect of Kurt's development. Tong Po serves as the film's primary antagonist, but he is more than simply a villain from a narrative perspective. He functions as the embodiment of the challenge Kurt must overcome. His role is less about personal growth and more about representing the obstacle standing between Kurt and his transformation. Unlike Kurt, Tong Po remains largely unchanged throughout the story. He begins the film as an intimidating, ruthless fighter and remains that way through the final confrontation. This lack of development is intentional, since Tong Po serves as a fixed point against which Kurt's growth can be measured. His confidence borders on arrogance, and he seems to believe that his strength makes him untouchably, an attitude that contrasts sharply with Xian Chao's humility and discipline. As a result, the final fight isn't just a physical battle but a clash of values. In many ways, Tong Po represents what Kurt might have become if he relied solely on physical power without developing emotional maturity. His brutality serves as a warning about the dangers of strength without wisdom. Winston Taylor also plays an important supporting role, acting as a friend and guide to Kurt. Winston helps Kurt navigate unfamiliar surroundings and situations, providing practical assistance while also offering encouragement during difficult moments. While Kickboxer is often celebrated for its action sequences, martial arts choreography, and inspirational training scenes, the film's costume and set design also play a crucial role in creating its identity. These visual elements help establish character personalities, reinforce themes, define locations, and immerse audiences in the world of the story. Despite working with a relatively modest budget compared to major Hollywood productions, the film's designers used creativity to craft costumes and sets that felt authentic, memorable, and engaging. One of the most important responsibilities of costume design is helping audiences understand characters before they even speak, and throughout Kickboxer, clothing frequently communicates information about status, personality, cultural background, and emotional development. Wardrobe choices that might seem simple at first glance actually contribute significantly to the storytelling. At the beginning of the film, Eric is presented as an internationally recognized kickboxing champion, and his clothing reflects that status: a confident, professional, and clearly established within the competitive fighting world. Kurt's wardrobe, by contrast, is more casual and understated. While he is clearly physically capable, his clothing reinforces the idea that he hasn't yet reached the same level of achievement as his older brother. He looks less like a champion and more like someone still searching for his place in the world. An important distinction, since costume design tracks his character development as the story progresses. Kurt's wardrobe gradually changes during the training portion of the film, shifting away from casual appearance toward more practical clothing, and these choices reinforce his growing focus on hard work rather than image or status. The training sequences feature some of the movie's most memorable wardrobe choices, with simple training garments that allow for physical movement and let audiences focus on Kurt's development as a martial artist. The absence of elaborate costuming during these scenes reflects the film's broader commitment to authenticity and discipline. Kurt's clothing throughout training communicates the difficulty of the process, showing evidence of dirt, sweat, and physical strain rather than presenting training as glamorous. And the visual elements of his costume design keep the audience's focus directly on his physical and emotional effort. Xian Chao's costume design serves a very different purpose. As a mentor figure, his clothing immediately distinguishes him from other characters, and his wardrobe reflects simplicity and a connection to traditional values. The design avoids excess, allowing his personality and presence to define his character rather than relying on elaborate visual decoration. This simplicity reinforces his role within the narrative. Xian Chao is not concerned with status or appearances. His focus is on knowledge, discipline, and self-mastery, and his understated clothing communicates these qualities effectively. Tong Po's visual design remains one of the most iconic aspects of the film. The filmmakers understood that a memorable villain requires a strong visual identity, and every aspect of his appearance contributes to his intimidating presence. His muscular physique, combined with stark, minimal clothing and intense facial expressions, was designed to make him instantly recognizable to audiences and to reinforce his reputation as a ruthless competitor. His visual design communicates power, confidence, and dominance, and the filmmakers intentionally minimized unnecessary visual elements in order to let his physical presence speak for itself. This approach proved highly effective. Even years after the film's release, audiences can instantly recognize Tong Po by his appearance alone, and his visual design has become one of the most successful examples of villain characterization in martial arts cinema. Set design throughout Kickboxer is equally important in establishing atmosphere and supporting the story. Much of the film relied on real, practical locations rather than extensive studio construction of the streets, villages, marketplaces, and rural landscapes created a world that feels genuinely lived in and believable, rather than sterile or artificial. The film embraces the texture and complexity of real, working locations, and this realism helps immerse audiences in Kurt's journey. Busy, crowded settings communicate energy and unpredictability, reinforcing the idea that Kurt must adapt in order to survive and succeed in an unfamiliar world. By contrast, many of the training locations are more isolated and peaceful, symbolizing his internal growth and self-discovery as he removes himself from the chaos of the outside world, using the setting to visually represent his internal transformation. One particularly effective aspect of the set design is its use of natural surroundings. Open landscapes and traditional structures frequently appear during the training scenes, and these locations create a sense of connection between physical discipline and the natural world, with the simplicity of the environment visually reinforcing the growth of Kurt's inner strength. The film's fighting arenas also deserve special attention. Combat sports films often rely heavily on the atmosphere of competition, and Kickboxer uses its fighting venues effectively, particularly in the final fight, where the setting becomes especially significant. The environment surrounding the climactic confrontation contributes greatly to its dramatic weight. Audiences sense that this location isn't merely a backdrop but an arena where Kurt's personal destiny will be decided. Lighting works closely with the set design throughout these scenes, and interior and outdoor settings alike take advantage of bright, natural, tropical light to create visuals that feel both vibrant and authentic. The film makes effective use of environmental details, decor, furniture, architecture, and background activity to help create believable spaces without drawing attention away from the central story, contributing to a strong sense of world building that supports Kurt's development throughout. While much of the conversation around Kickbox naturally focuses on the action scenes, training montages, and martial arts choreography, the screenplay itself plays a far more important role in the film's success than it's often given credit for. The script doesn't rely on lengthy speeches, complex plot twists, or elaborate philosophical debate, so instead, it succeeds because it understands how dialogue and structure work together to support the film's emotional core, allowing the action to remain the primary attraction. One of the screenplay's greatest strengths is its simplicity. Many action films become overly complicated by introducing numerous subplots or excessive exposition that isn't strictly necessary to the story. Kickboxer avoids these pitfalls by maintaining a clear focus on its central narrative. From the beginning, the audience understands the primary conflict, the emotional stakes, and the objective driving the protagonist. This clarity allows viewers to become invested almost immediately. The script establishes the relationship between Kurt and Eric quickly and effectively, without spending excessive time explaining their history. Instead, the screenplay uses natural dialogue and behavior to demonstrate the brothers' deep affection for one another, which makes the eventual tragedy all the more impactful. Another strength of the screenplay is its understanding of motivation. The best action films succeed because audiences understand why the protagonist is fighting, and in Kickboxer, Kurt's motivation is never complicated. His brother has suffered a devastating injury, and he feels a responsibility to seek justice. This emotional foundation drives the story forward without requiring a complicated plot. One especially interesting screenplay decision involves Tong Po, whose intimidating presence relies far more heavily on visual storytelling than on dialogue. He speaks very few words throughout the film, yet audiences learn everything they need to know about him through observation, which demonstrates real confidence in visual storytelling as a way of conveying information. This technique proves particularly effective during the fight sequences and training montages. Rather than relying on verbal explanation, the audience understands Kurt's progress because they witness his determination, frustration, and growth communicated visually. This balance between dialogue and action helps maintain the film's momentum throughout. Xian Chao's dialogue provides some of the screenplay's most meaningful moments. As the mentor figure, he serves as the primary source of the film's more reflective conversations, which frequently focus on discipline, patience, and self-control. What makes his dialogue effective is its simplicity. Rather than delivering long, complicated lectures, his lines remain concise and practical. The screenplay understands that audiences are more likely to remember straightforward wisdom connected directly to Kurt's experiences, and through Xian Chao's dialogue, the screenplay reinforces one of the film's central themes, that martial arts are ultimately about personal growth rather than simple violence. Humor is also used occasionally throughout the script as a way of balancing the story's more serious elements. Characters such as Winston Taylor provide moments of levity that prevent the narrative from feeling overly heavy, adding emotional variety while also making the characters feel more relatable. The screenplay uses these comedic moments sparingly rather than overusing them, undercutting the film's more dramatic beats. So instead, these lighter interludes serve as brief opportunities for audiences to relax before the story returns to its central conflict. This balance contributes to the film's pacing and overall entertainment value. Speaking of pacing, one of the script's most impressive achievements is its overall structure. The story follows a classic progression that audiences instinctively understand. First, the characters and central conflict are introduced. Next, tragedy strikes, then comes a period of training and preparation, and finally, the climactic confrontation resolves the central conflict. While this structure may seem predictable on paper, it moves the narrative forward efficiently and keeps the film consistently engaging. The training portion of the film deserves particular attention, since this is often the section where a screenplay might struggle to hold audience interest during preparation sequences. In Kickboxer, however, the training sequences and the personal development Kurt undergoes contribute meaningfully to his overall transformation. The audience isn't simply watching physical exercises, so they're witnessing a gradual evolution in confidence, discipline, and self-understanding, which gives the training sequences emotional significance well beyond their practical purpose within the plot. The screenplay also succeeds in building Tong Po into a genuinely formidable antagonist. The success of Kickboxer can be attributed not just to its story, action sequences, and performances, but also, like every successful film, to an effective marketing campaign capable of attracting audiences and setting the movie apart from competing releases. The film didn't benefit from the massive promotional budgets available to major Hollywood blockbusters, so its marketing strategy needed to be especially resourceful, relying on carefully designed posters, trailers, home video distribution, word of mouth, and the growing popularity of Jean-Claude Van Damme to build a lasting audience beyond its original theatrical release. To understand the film's marketing, it's important to consider the era in which it was released. The late 1980s represented something of a golden age for action cinema, with audiences regularly turning out for films featuring charismatic heroes, memorable villains, spectacular fights, and stories of triumph over adversity. The challenge for marketers was convincing audiences that Kickboxer deserved a place among these crowded releases. Fortunately, the filmmakers had one major advantage: one of the most exciting new stars in action cinema. While Van Damme wasn't yet a global superstar, audiences recognized that he was capable of performing genuinely impressive martial arts techniques on screen, and the promotional campaign and marketing materials highlighted his athletic abilities, flexibility, and combat skills drawn directly from the film's action sequences. This strategy proved effective because it set Van Damme apart from many other action stars of the period. While many relied primarily on firearms and explosions, Van Damme's appeal came from genuine martial arts performance, and the marketing campaign successfully communicated this distinction. Posters played a key role in promoting Kickboxer, since during the 1980s, theatrical posters served as one of the primary tools for attracting potential audience, so a strong poster needed to communicate the film's tone, genre, and central premise in a matter of seconds. The promotional artwork for Kickboxer typically featured Van Damme in a dynamic physical pose, showcasing his athletic and fighting abilities. These visual choices immediately signaled to audiences that the film belonged firmly within the martial arts action category. The posters also highlighted the dramatic conflict between the hero and the villain. Even viewers unfamiliar with the story could quickly understand that the movie involved a determined protagonist preparing for a dangerous battle. This simplicity made the marketing accessible and effective. Trailers were also an essential component of the promotional campaign. The film's trailers emphasized action, training, and emotional stakes, with editors selecting footage that showcased Van Damme's martial arts skills while also highlighting the personal drama that motivates the story. The trailers carefully balanced multiple objectives, needing to demonstrate the quality of the fight choreography while also introducing the threat posed by Tong Po.